Welcome to today's webinar, A Collector's Guide to Avoiding Sample Failure and Testing Delays, presented by Elizabeth O'Bannon, Technical Leader, and Brandi Bacon, Administrative Supervisor at DNA Solutions. You can find the presentation handout on the lower portion of the GoToWebinar toolbox under Handouts. We are recording this session and will include the recording in a follow-up email. Questions may be submitted throughout the webinar using the GoToWebinar toolbox on the right side of your screen under the Questions tab. We will answer the questions submitted following the presentation. If we do not get to your question today, a list of questions and answers will be emailed to all attendees following the webinar. Thank you for joining today's session.
In today's session, we will discuss the best collection practices to help avoid sample failure and testing delays. We will review chain of custody forms, sample envelopes, and required sample documentation, which will aid clients to steer clear of common submission errors. We will provide insight into the best ways to collect a sample as to avoid partial profiles, failed samples, mixtures, and sample swaps. We will also touch base on proper shipping techniques and storage conditions. Having a deeper understanding of each of these areas is sure to improve collection processes and provide your clients with an overall great experience that includes quick, accurate results. First, we're going to dive into case submission. About 30% of cases that get placed on hold and experience testing delays are due to missing information or errors surrounding the completion of our chain of custody form. The information chain of custody form is included inside the free DNA collection kits provided at your facility by DNA Solutions, as well as electronically in our onboarding welcome packets, and can also be downloaded directly on our website. It is important to know that a completed information chain of custody form should be included with every case you submit, both legal and informational. This form allows DNA Solutions to know which company is submitting the case and allows us to know which side is responsible for payment and where we should submit results. It also provides details pertaining to which samples we should have received or should expect to receive so we can quickly recognize if any samples are missing from a case and inform our clients accordingly. It is important that you complete all fields and that you print clearly. If a government-issued ID is not provided for attested parties, names are entered into our database as they are indicated on the chain of custody form. Unclear handwriting can easily lead to names appearing incorrectly on reports. As we move forward, we will break down this form into 3 separate sections and give greater insight into how to correctly complete each area. Any area that is missing information or is completed incorrectly will require DNA Solutions to email our partner site and request a correction be made before we can continue with testing or releasing results. The top portion of this form indicates the date, time, and location a collection takes place, as well as the individual who performed the collection. Please make sure the date and time of the collection is provided, as this is a requirement for our accreditation as well as many court systems. If you are collecting individuals on separate dates or the same day but different times, you want to be sure to have a form for each different collection you perform, regardless if they are for the same case. Include the name of the company and the address where the collection took place, as well as the phone number and email address. This provides record of where the collection occurred, as well as who we need to contact, bill, and release results to. In addition to clearly printing the collector's name, it is highly important the collector signs the affirmation statement indicating that samples were collected properly, and no tampering of the samples occurred during the collection. Missing information on this section can cause delays in testing, results to be issued to the wrong recipient, or payment associated with the case could be billed to the wrong partner site. The middle portion of the chain of custody form provides the details pertaining to the case you are submitting. Test type is important as it indicates how a case is managed and ran in the laboratory. Legal, informational, and immigration cases undergo different processes and protocols in the laboratory and are billed differently as well. It is also important to clearly select the relationship to be tested. If you are ever not sure which relationship is the correct choice to mark, please call or email our facility for assistance. You can select multiple tests of relationships to be tested. However, any selection exceeding 1 will be an additional test fee. Each test participant's name should be clearly printed as well as the role they have in the case. The role marked on the chain of custody form should match the role of the participant sample envelope. You can see here we used a half-siblingship as an example. When including additional parties in a test for conclusive results such as parents, grandparents, or other relatives, please be sure to indicate exactly how they are related to the individual being tested. Here you can see that Jennifer Smith is not just serving the role of mother, but she is specifically the mother of sibling 1, Jane Doe. This information is vital to ensure our lab staff sets up a family tree correctly to give an accurate analysis and result. Following this area is a location to indicate if additional samples are expected to be included in this case. For this example, we marked yes. The mother of the second sibling is expected to arrive from another facility. If you have no other samples coming because everyone is being collected at the same location on the same day at the same time, you can mark no on this section. However, anytime you have a sample coming at a different date, different time, same day, different time, or different location, you want to indicate yes, so we know a separate chain of custody and additional samples associated with the case. You want to be sure to indicate who the samples belong to. Give a full, clearly printed name, and if known, the role they will play. Be sure to indicate where the sample is coming from. This is important to ensure samples are matched appropriately. If it is coming from somewhere other than your office, you want to provide the party responsible for payment. This is not a field where you need to put who paid you. We simply need to know which site DNA Solutions needs to bill for the case. You'll see here that ABC Labs is performing the collection for the 2 siblings and 1 mother, that the second mother is coming from XYZ Labs in Hollywood. This area is letting us know that ABC Labs is the primary facility responsible for this case, and therefore that is the site we need to bill and ultimately release results to. If ABC Labs was just performing the collection for XYZ Labs, then they would have needed to put XYZ Labs on this third line regarding payment, and DNA Solutions would have then billed XYZ Labs and results released to their facility rather than ABC Labs. Finally, the last portion of the section is regarding contact articles. If you are submitting a sample other than the standard buccal swab provided in your free DNA Solutions collection kit, or an FTA blood card, then you would mark yes in this field. This includes but is not limited to cotton swabs, whole blood, toothbrushes, bones, tissue samples, urine, and so forth. Please be aware that additional fees apply for non-standard samples as well as longer turnaround times. The final bottom section of this form serves as the chain of custody which is required by our accrediting body. Please know the form states this section is required for all legal and immigration testing. Here the collector will sign over custody of the collection materials to the carrier used for shipping the case to DNA Solutions. The collector needs to sign their name and put the date and time the samples are being relinquished. Please be sure to put the carrier and tracking number. If you are using one of our free provided air bills, then you will put FedEx in box 2, along with the tracking number indicated directly on the air bill. Please leave the bottom portion of this section blank as it is for DNA Solutions use only.
Following the completion of the chain of custody forms, you'll want to transition into completing the appropriate sample envelopes for the individuals you're collecting. About 50% of cases that get placed on hold and experience testing delays are due to missing information or errors surrounding the completion of our sample collection envelopes. Our partner sites can handle the completion of these envelopes as they wish. Some sites will have the tested parties complete the envelopes themselves, while others will only have the collectors fill out this information. That is at your discretion. Regardless, you want to ensure that all required information is completed and provided accurately and clearly. Please confirm that you choose the correct envelope for the individuals you are collecting, and if you will be using the green additional party envelope, be sure to indicate what relationship or role is associated with that person. Please note, if a legal guardian is completing a sample envelope on behalf of a minor, they need to provide correct information associated with the individual giving the sample. Frequently, legal guardians will mistakenly put down their own information rather than that of the minor. When samples are mislabeled, a recollection is often required, especially for legal cases. Here is an example of how a completed sample envelope should look. All fields should be completed clearly and accurately. Please keep in mind all fields are required for legal testing. Although informational cases do not require as much information, race and sex are required for all testing, including non-legal cases. When selecting a race, it is important to know that should your client fail to select a race listed on the envelope, testing cannot proceed. Testing will also be delayed for instances where multiple races are circled, as the lab is not able to move forward if more than one race has been selected, or if an additional race has been written in. Populations around the world have different genetic diversity. Therefore, the commonality of their DNA profiles are affected by that diversity. DNA testing can take advantage of this by creating specific testing values within a population. This allows for a more accurate probability of relationship to be determined. At DNA Solutions, the populations used for relationship testing are African, Asian, Caucasian, Hispanic, and Native American, per the FBI database and associated statistics. It is imperative that individuals select only one of these races. If a client is of mixed races, they should choose the one they identify with the most, or they can pay for an additional analysis and have a report generated under each racial database, as we can only run a test under one race at a time. You'll see here on this example that the individual selected yes for, have you received a blood transfusion in the last 3 months? This answer is fine for submitted buccal swabs. The only time having a yes answer on one of these two questions would cause a potential issue is if the sample being provided is a blood or tissue sample. The collection of skin cells using the standard buccal swabs are typically not affected by these procedures. It is also important to note that the sibling is a minor, and therefore her guardian needs to sign consent. Please ensure the guardian signs their own name on the consent line and does not sign the minor's name. This is a common mistake that we have seen over the years. A collector should review the completed envelope thoroughly for missing information or errors before proceeding with a collection.
Correcting errors made during a collection, whether on the chain of custody form or on a sample envelope, should be done by simply marking one line through the error, placing your initials and date, followed by the correction. Please do not use whiteout or obliterate the mistake by marking vigorously on the error. As an example, there have been instances where a collector has made an error on a child's date of birth, writing the incorrect year born. They accidentally wrote 2020 when they meant 2021. Rather than making the appropriate correction, they simply wrote a very heavy number 1 over the 0. When the sample came in, the team at DNA Solutions was unable to read the date of birth and was not confident which year was correct. The case had to be placed on hold pending the date of birth confirmation. About 20% of cases that get placed on hold and experience testing delays are due to missing information or errors surrounding the supporting documents. Legal cases require that a government-issued photo ID be provided for each tested individual, such as a driver's license or passport. Other forms of government-issued IDs, such as Social Security cards, birth certificates, and insurance cards, are acceptable but must be accompanied by a clear photo of the individual being tested. Please note that the name shown on the results provided will be obtained from the ID submitted. If a hospital temporary birth certificate is provided with a name such as Baby Boy Smith, the name Baby Boy Smith will be used on the report. If you do not want a report to reflect a name as shown on an ID, please refrain from submitting that ID to our laboratory, as we are required to reference an ID once we receive one. Photos can be provided for identification without another form of government-issued ID. Photos should be clear and able to be used for identification purposes. Please do not submit photos that are blurry or too dark. Please make sure the individual is not cut out of the photo or only half their face visible. Often we receive photos of babies covered by blankets or being held by parents where only half their face is visible. We need a clear, full view of a person's face to use the photo for identification purposes. If a photo is the only form of ID provided, names and reports will match the names as they are written on the information chain of custody form. Be sure to include all photos, IDs, and supporting documents outside of the sample envelopes. Please do not ever seal these items in a sample envelope along with the collected buccal swab. Remembering to include the following items as part of your supporting documentation for cases where a minor is collected. We need the printed name and signature of the legal guardian, as well as a clear photo or copy of their photo ID, the relationship to the tested party, such as mother, and the date of birth of the legal guardian. These pieces of information can be provided in any format you choose, or we have a legal guardian consent form available as a guide.
The process of collecting a sample is extremely important in aiding to the success of a sample. While all legal cases are required to be performed by a trained collector, DNA Solutions highly recommends that all cases, informational included, be properly performed by a trained collector. A quick 9-minute video, collection training video, is available on our website 24/7. Following a simple technique and guideline when collecting a sample can help prevent contamination, mixtures, partial profiles, degraded DNA, and sample swaps. As we dive deeper into some of these tips and tricks, we will discuss the importance of wearing gloves, obtaining one sample at a time, making sure the testing parties do not eat, drink, or use tobacco products before a collection, as well as the amount of time a sample should be collected, and one very important rule, avoiding plastic. Gloves should be worn during a collection, not only for your protection from bodily fluids, but also for your client's protection from any possibility of contamination from you. The goal of every sample is to obtain a single source profile, meaning the profile of just one individual. To avoid contamination and possible mixtures, wearing gloves is your best bet when collecting any sample, including non-standard samples. Also be sure that samples from each tested party do not come in contact with each other. For example, if an alleged father and a child both provide a toothbrush for testing, be sure to package their toothbrushes separately from each other. Additional sources of mixtures that we have commonly seen in the past have resulted from mothers breastfeeding their children or putting a baby's pacifier in their own mouth. If a child is recently breastfed or is spitting up from being fed recently, consider waiting a minimum of 30 minutes before collecting a child's sample. Kissing someone right before collection can also provide mixed profiles in rare instances, as well as drinking from the same straw or sharing food utensils with another individual. Here is a visual of the profiles we see on our end when analyzing your cases. This is an example of a single source male profile containing no mixtures. You will see that many of the markers have 2 peaks per marker and that some only have 1 peak per marker. In the instances where there is only 1 peak at a marker, that is 2 copies of that 1 peak, which is why they are often taller than the places where you see 2 peaks. As we move into other examples, you'll get a visual of what we see when we obtain a mixture, as well as when a partial profile is obtained from a sample. This example shows a 2-person mixture. A single source profile would have 1 or 2 peaks present for each marker. Many of the markers on this profile have more than 2 peaks. For example, you can see here at the end of the first channel, the marker Penta-E has 3 peaks, and the marker D18S51 on the second channel has 4 peaks. Having more than 2 peaks is an indication that there is more than 1 person present in this profile. Here is another example of a mixed profile. However, this particular one only has a few markers showing the presence of a second individual. Because this is a low-level mixture with a discernible major contributor, this profile could undergo a mixture analysis. This final example shows a complex mixture. As you can see, more than 2 individuals' DNA is present on this profile. Unfortunately, a mixture analysis would not be an option for this instance, and a replacement sample would need to be collected. It is important to remember that both mixture analysis and replacement samples result in longer processing times and additional fees. This is why we highly encourage our collectors to wear gloves and be cautious of surroundings and scenarios that could result in contaminated samples. When mixtures are obtained, we are unable to confirm the source of the mixture. It is not clear if the mixture was due to contamination on behalf of the tested party or the collector. We do, however, have lab processes in place to prevent contamination and mixtures from occurring in the laboratory. Samples we receive are cut, sealed, and labeled, one at a time, and then processed by case. Laboratory staff members always wear PPE to prevent the possibility of their own DNA contaminating the samples. When mixtures are obtained, they are cross-referenced to the profiles of all DNA Solutions employees to confirm the contamination was not caused internally.
Collecting one person at a time is sure to help prevent accidental sample swabs. You want to have only one sample envelope out at a time. After you swab an individual, have them verify you are holding the correct sample envelope with their accurate identifying information on it, and then immediately place that collected swab into the sample envelope and seal it appropriately with the evidence seal. Once that process is completed, you can then repeat the process onto the next tested individual and so forth, one person at a time. Collecting one person completely and sealing their sample before collecting the next individual is a sure way to prevent this from occurring. There are a few ways we can infer a sample swap may have occurred. One of the common signs is when a sample provides a profile of the opposite gender than that indicated on the envelope. For example, if a child named Derek was indicated to be male and his sister Sarah was indicated to be female, but then Derek's sample produced a female profile and Sarah's produced a male profile, it's likely the samples were placed into the wrong child envelopes at the time of collection. Another common example is when a case results in an alleged father being excluded as the father to the child, but the alleged father shows to not be excluded as the father to the mother. This indicates the mother sample was placed into the child's envelope and the child sample into the mother's envelope. When a sample swap appears to be likely, DNA Solutions can perform a quality control check by rerunning a sample and cross-referencing our templates to confirm the swap did not occur internally.
Before performing a collection, it is important to speak with your clients and ensure they have not had anything to eat, drink, or smoke before moving forward. Other things to inquire about as well include chewing gum and other tobacco and marijuana products. A small amount of water prior to a collection should be fine. However, please have your client refrain from drinking prior to the collection, as this could dilute the number of buccal cells you are trying to collect. Eating or using tobacco products could interfere with testing and prevent the laboratory from obtaining a full comparable profile. Clients should wait a minimum of 30 minutes after partaking in any of these activities before having their mouths swabbed. Those 30 minutes can easily pass by while completing chain of custody forms, sample envelopes, and processing payment. So be sure to ask these questions at the beginning of a collection appointment to save yourself some time. When collecting a participant, open the swab sleeve as indicated on the packaging, remove the swab, and insert the side containing the polyester tip into their mouth. Press the swab into the side of the cheek and intently rub in a circular motion, using the entire tip of the swab to collect the sample. Your goal is to collect shedding skin cells from the inside of the cheek, not to saturate the swab with saliva. Collection should be performed for a minimum of 15 seconds per cheek. Often collecting young children and babies can be difficult, as they can push away the swab with their tongue. In these situations, you can run the swab tip along the top gun line in addition to the inside cheeks. We encourage collectors to start with any adult participants and calmly speak with children as you perform the collection to reassure them how easy and pain-free the process is. It is not necessary to collect more than one swab per person. In events where multiple swabs were collected, it is not possible for our laboratory staff to confirm which swab was collected first, second, and fourth. Any subsequent swabs may have less DNA available for testing than the first initial swab collected. DNA Solutions lab procedures include processing of one buccal swab per test participant by opening envelopes and pulling the first swab available to move forward for testing. If multiple swabs are present and the swab chosen does not produce a profile, we may contact you about testing one of the subsequent swabs. However, replacement sample fees would apply as well as additional processing time. Swabbing intently for a minimum of 15 seconds while rotating a swab has a higher probability of providing a suitable sample for your client than submitting multiple swabs for testing. It is highly recommended to follow the standard of only one swab per person. The only instance where we recommend collecting additional samples would be events where that individual could not easily be recollected should their sample not provide a comparable profile, such as deceased individuals or someone who lives in another country. Here we have a partial profile. You can see there are peaks present, however, the software has not assigned a number to them because they are not detectable. DNA Solutions has validated thresholds, and if peaks do not rise above these thresholds, the software will not call them. The reason for the peaks not meeting the thresholds is often due to an insufficient amount of DNA present on the sample. This can be due to poor collection methods or simply because the DNA was degraded by not being stored properly, which we will cover here shortly. This particular profile here is not usable for comparison. Here's an example of a partial profile that is suitable for comparison. For instances like this, your client would still be provided a report. However, the report would indicate which markers were not included in the statistical analysis due to the peaks not meeting the laboratory threshold. Here is an example of a potentially degraded partial profile. Here you can see only 2 peaks were called. However, this is not enough information for us to make any type of conclusion, and recollection would be necessary. To avoid these types of situations, swab your clients with a purpose and wait 30 minutes after a tested party eats, drinks, or uses tobacco. If submitting a non-standard sample, call our team members for assistance to ensure enough sample is submitted for testing.
When packaging and shipping your samples, it is important to keep these things in mind, as poor packing and shipping conditions can lead to degraded DNA. Once sample collection is completed, it is important to place the swab back into the swab sleeve before inserting it into the sample envelope. Please do not put any materials that have DNA or potential DNA on them into plastic bags or containers. In doing so, you often trap moisture. Humidity and moisture can lead to bacteria or fungal growth, which can inhibit a sample from being successful. This includes placing paper sample envelopes into plastic Ziploc baggies. Often this causes samples to be moist or entirely wet upon arrival to our facility, and typically will result in a failed or partial profile. If possible, avoid shipping samples over the weekend, as this can help prevent samples from degrading. This is especially important for non-standard samples such as urine, whole blood, tissue, and bones, as you certainly do not want those types of samples to sit over the weekend in a warm warehouse. If a sample is being stored cold in the freezer, then be sure to ship it in a cooler on dry ice. No sample should sit in a FedEx drop box over the weekend. You can always take your samples into a FedEx location if needed. If you have a case that you collect on a Friday that will not be able to be picked up prior to your local FedEx cutoff time, please hold the samples until Monday for FedEx to deliver to our facility on Tuesday. Your cases get delivered at the same time but undergo better storage conditions when following this practice. If you are not sure the best way to package and ship a sample, please call one of our team members for assistance.
In addition to shipping conditions, storage conditions can also affect whether a sample is viable for testing. Samples should be kept in a cool, dry area. Always avoid hot locations and keep samples out of direct sunlight. It is important for mobile collectors to avoid placing cases on their dashboards under the sun. Keep an empty cooler or a cool, dry storage box to hold collected samples to keep them as cool as possible while you are out collecting, especially if you have several cases to collect throughout the day.
We want to thank each of you for your time today. We will now take questions. As a reminder, questions can be submitted using the GoToWebinar toolbox on the right side of your screen under the Questions tab. If we do not get to your question today, a list of questions and answers will be emailed to all attendees following the webinar. I do have a few questions submitted. First question is, what is the most common non-standard samples you can test that are successful in providing profiles?
Well, most non-standard samples are just that, non-standard. It's dependent on how much DNA has been deposited on the sample. Often toothbrushes are a really good option. They're something that most people use every day and should have a fair amount of DNA deposited. And we see more than 50% of the time we can get a very good partial or a full profile off of them.
Okay. Another question is, what should I do if I drop a swab?
If you drop a swab while you're collecting someone, either before you've started, during, or even after, we recommend that you go ahead and take a fresh swab and recollect that person. Keeping in mind that if you've already swabbed them once, you would probably want to go a little bit firmer on your collection, or a little bit longer in the time you spend trying to collect those buccal cells.
Okay. What should I do if I forget to include photos and IDs with my legal case?
You can always email us directly at DNA Solutions with those photos and IDs. Please reference the names of the parties that you collected, and we can go ahead and add those to the case as soon as they arrive at our facility.
And how old can a toothbrush be to be tested?
We do get that question a lot, of how old is a sample and how viable can it be. Again, it really depends on how much DNA was originally deposited on that sample, where it was stored, how long it was stored, temperature, humidity. A lot of different factors go into the viability of a sample that we test. We've seen toothbrushes as old as a few years get viable profiles. So it really comes down to, again, asking your clients how things have been stored or how they found an item is really helpful for us sometimes, just to kind of get an idea of why we might need a recollection if it doesn't work.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Okay, well, if anyone has any other questions following the completion of this webinar, please feel free to call or email us at any time. We did have one pop up just now. How many days after birth can a test be done? I can go ahead and answer that. You can actually collect a child minutes after they are born. As soon as mom and baby are ready, you are able to swab the mouth of that child. There's no particular amount of days that you need to wait before processing a test. Any other questions? Okay. Will you be sending out a recording of this webinar? I missed some of it. Yes, absolutely. All attendees will get a recording of this webinar, as well as the questions and answers that followed it. And if you have any follow-up questions after watching that recording, please reach out to us via phone or email so that we can make sure we provide you any information that you need. Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. We really appreciate everybody's time today, and we look forward to our next time together. Have a great day.